you know, it feels weird. It's 3 o'clock my time.
Oh.
So it's not actually evening.
I hate that.
So it's not evening, but it's evening here. And I'm excited to spend time with you all over the next few days and get to know you. But before we get started, I actually want to do a quick round. If you just, I know for those introverts, you hate this. I'm an introvert. I hate when there's a circle. I'm going to do it anyway. Because what I'd like to know is why you came to this session. As someone said to me earlier, it's a really heavy topic. It's 6 o'clock in the evening. Anyway, I would just love to hear why you came to this particular session and what you, yeah, just quickly. Where do we want to start?
Why did you come to this? Well,
Yeah,
my wife is coming here too.
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
it's yours, Teresa.
Yes.
Any session by you. No, but look, it's really difficult to uncover unconscious bias, hence unconscious, right? So anything you have to say, about that topic, love to hear it.
Okay, great.
Hi, I'm Bob, and my wife suggested or stated that she wanted to come. She's moving to work, and me personally, anything that helps me become a better father to my children, that's really what I want. I want a relationship that's better. I had a great relationship with my parents, but I want it better for my children.
Great. All right.
So I'm Jennifer. Alright, so I'm gonna out myself.
There you go.
I've been wanting to read your book and I haven't found space because there's too much noise in my head, but you were gonna be here and I wanted to hear you speak. The reason why I picked this topic is because I have a lot of crap and my crap trickles onto my children and I need to get rid of that crap so that I can have a better relationship with my children.
We all got crap. So
Yeah.
you're right in the room. Yeah.
My crap sees your crap.
So if you sit next to Jennifer, that means you go next to say your name and why you came to the session.
What is this session?
Perfect. I love it. That's great. Good enough.
Just if I can take out some of my many biases that I have, it will be very, very good.
Just introduce yourself and why you came to the session.
I am here last year at the conference. I missed you.
Oh.
Here we go. Over, right?
Great.
I'm Meredith. Last year, my husband came to the conference and I had to work. So he said, finally come to your session. I have a very intense work that goes into like my whole life, and it does reflect onto my children.
Yeah.
I'm Peter. I'm here because you were awesome last year. And
Just say I was really bad and you were hoping I would be better this year. Yeah, just joking. Go ahead.
And I think we all have room to grow.
David, I'm here partly because someone told me
That was me.
that I should. And the second reason is I'm here just to learn more about him.
I'm Kathy, I'm with him.
I think.
That means the other room is predicting their life.
Yes.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, it's to hit the button rather than to the.
Oh, okay. All right.
And I have a 12-year-old and we need options and we're new to this.
Okay, great. Yeah.
I'm Amy, and I'm here because I dragged them.
All right.
I'm here because I have been to 4 conferences with you now, something like that, and you're just so awesome. I just can't get over it. That's why I'm here.
I'm not feeling any more nervous than was.
I have to take a conference call, so I have to leave to take a conference call, so don't feel any pressure.
Like, man, I brought those people and now I'm leaving because it's so bad. Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Kat, and I really enjoyed your panels last year, and also the title caught my eye.
Okay, great.
I'm Karen,
Yeah, yeah.
I'm Sophia, and I'm hoping you do better this year.
Thank
No,
you.
I'm kidding. Yeah, they come in. Open-minded chance to redeem yourself.
I'm Jacqueline. I have been following you for about a month, and I want to be friend.
Hi, I'm Barney, and I represent Curious. I don't know you. I want to know more.
I'm Melissa, and our group did book club on your book. It was great. We struggled, fought, and cried, and so I have to come see you.
I'm Michelle. I hosted this class. I forgot to recommend.
So it's your fault? There you go.
I missed you last year. Every time I chose a different conversation, I kept trying to hear about your book, but I didn't connect with the book. And after the conference, I kept telling myself, you can't do it. And everywhere I went, people kept talking about books. So as you know, people that I absolutely adore kept telling me this is the best book ever about parenting. And finally I got the book. It was exactly what people promised me. I really enjoyed it. I haven't finished it yet. Surprisingly, although I started reading it almost a year ago. And there was no chance of going to see this time. I just wanted to thank you for change my daughter's life. Hi, I'm Deanna, and Amy also told me that you were the one that wrote the book. It reminded me, like, I read the book and like, oh, I got it. So I'm curious about your conversation.
Hi, I'm Pauline, and I know all these people who are talking about your book.
But,
I mean, the title was definitely enticing, but I've heard such wonderful things, and I can't wait to experience and learn.
I'm Julie, and yes, ditto, 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 ditto. I love you. Love the title. We're all full of BS, and it's good to look at it in groups. Thank you.
I'm Hema, and I met Jesus once, and loved you. And I'm very glad to be here. I've read essays and stuff on that. I haven't read the book yet, but the title, I mean, I'm giving you.
Awesome. I'm Terry. Anyway, Teresa wrote a book that I believe is one of two of the most profound books I've ever read parenting as a parent. And it just floored me, and it made me pivot my whole parenting style and parenting idea. And the only other book that did that was an Alfie Young book called Unconditional Parenting. And that was done many years earlier. And I love every word she said, and I set out to meet her because of that. So, thanks.
Rosemary, I just would like to improve always my relationship with my grandchildren.
I'm Andrea. I'm a Facebook fangirl, so I just came to the very first talk that you were at. I'm Taylor, and I heard you on a podcast with Pam and just ate up everything you had to say, and really just was so excited when you're going to be here.
I'm Tanya, and I think you talk about things that are a further step up from where you're being at initially when you started tonight. So, really
Hi, I'm Sheila. I haven't read your book, but after all this, now I have it. I'm Debbie. I was interested in the topic. Great, glad to meet you, and definitely going to have to check out the book.
I'm Gina, and I met Teresa back in April at an Unemployment Summit. And I learned about her book at the summit, and I ordered it while it was still there. I'm about halfway through it, but I'm loving everything. So
And I'm
learning a lot,
Yeah.
and I just, yeah, but yeah, I wanted to be here because of the title also, but what you don't know might actually hurt you.
Right.
So, yeah, and, yeah, I'm excited.
Thank you. All right. Anyone else? Anyone else want to chime
Well,
in?
Kathy and Justin, and did you guys come in?
Oh, yes, what was the question? Our names?
Yeah.
Just what brought you
And
over?
why we're here?
Yeah.
Because Teresa Graham Brett is great.
Yeah.
And I just love being on work. Her ego's
Every one of us.
It's
is-
there.
I only heard a few.
Yeah.
And I just love you, and I've known you for so many years. And it's been great.
All right. Great.
Me?
It's up to you, Justin. If Justin and Joe want to stay in the background, then no. I'm just kidding.
I know you through my mother.
Yeah.
And you guys have been friends for a long time, and I also love everything that you do, and I'm very interested in this topic.
All right.
I got Joe, and yes, there's everything I need to know from Kathy. That's why I'm here.
All right. Great. All right, anyone else? Want to chime in? We good? Right. Okay. So that I wanted to know why you all came, to make sure that I'm hitting the mark, and to also, make sure that I know how many people might know my story. But I'll tell a little bit of it when and some of it's in the book. So if it's repetitive, you can just say, "Come on, let's move on to the content." Also, we had, I thought I had an hour and 15 minutes, and since we had 15 more minutes, I was like, I want to hear from all of you before we get started. So I'm excited to have heard from you and hope that this really is a discussion as we go through, so you should feel free to interrupt, to ask questions, don't ask me to cite my sources. We were joking about this earlier, but anyway, so prior to becoming a parent, I had worked, and I currently work in universities, and I work with college students, and I do a lot of social justice education, and it started quite a bit in terms of working with students around intergroup dialogue, which meant I brought together students from different social identities to be able to talk to each other in structured formats to help them to gain greater understanding about issues, and to be able to gain empathy, perspective taking, conflict management, to also look at oppression and injustice as well. So that's where my work grounding was in that. And then I became a parent, and I thought, I am so progressive. I got it all together. I had thought about all those things. How many of us read every possible parenting book beforehand? Some of us do that because we're a bit compulsive. I'm less compulsive than I was at the time. And then Martel was born, and I was like, wow, I know nothing at all. And as he began to grow older, we were in a lot of conflict. When he turned about 2 to 4, that age, no one's probably experienced that except for me, that 2 to 4 age, and so I really struggled. I began to struggle. And then one of my big aha moments, and I think that might be in the book, but I've said it before, is Rob was it was still when there were tapes, videotaping, Martel's 14, Martel and I interacting. And it was when I was pregnant with Grayson, the second child in my life. And so he's happy, Rob's thinking, it's near the holidays, I'm videotaping my family. And then I watch it afterwards. He says, hey, I videotaped, you want to watch? And I saw myself interacting with Martel. And sort of my self-conception blew up in my face. And I now sometimes refer to myself jokingly as the one jelly bean mom, because I had an argument when Martel was 3 about only eating one jelly bean. Came from a very controlling parenting style to where I am now. And so my journey, when I saw that video, I was like, wow, I have now become my dad and my mom, and I really have to do something about that. This is not who I thought I was. All my values, all my perceptions of myself were, not on target. I had this belief about who I was. So I began really delving into that and trying to understand. That's why I started to write. I started to write not for anyone except for myself, because I was like, wow, how do I keep myself moving forward? How do I stay accountable for my own learning? So that was when I decided I wanted to write, and also bring in some of the things that I had done with college students into my own learning process. It also made me think, why is it so hard for students at 19 to understand issues of injustice, unless that's their particular identities. Why is that so hard? And I began to think about parent-child relationships in a different way from a societal perspective. And then I began to think, wow, it's really the foundation for all forms of power and dominance over other people. And that's what I began to write and try to think through myself. This past year, and in the last probably 2 or 3 years, I've been doing some stuff and trying to understand more about neuroscience. So I have a law degree. That means I have a very surface understanding of neuroscience. But I like to read it. I like to pass over some of the words I don't understand and try to gain those concepts. But I started thinking about brain development and then why is it so hard? Not only from a socialization perspective, like I'm socialized to use power over people, but also from a place of what's going on in my brain. Particularly as I started to use more mindfulness practices and awareness practices. So, and this past year, the work I've been doing with some students at the University of Arizona has really been around unconscious bias, helping people understand how it is unconscious bias comes to be across all groups, how it is we take that in and what is the result of that. Because it's not just about our behavior. I started thinking about there's more going on than just our behavior. Isn't that a cool picture of a brain? I found that on the internet. So as I started reading more about brain development, I started thinking about, well, what does the brain do? Anyone neuroscience person may know a lot more than I do. Okay, that makes it easier and less stressful for me. But usually if someone is, then I'll say, feel free to chime in and correct me if you think that I'm wrong. So, one of the things about our brain, and a lot of this came from some of Daniel Siegel's work. If anyone's ever read Daniel Siegel, he has Brainstorm, which I read a couple years ago as my oldest son was becoming a teenager. The Mind of a Teenager, and that was really helpful to me, one piece. And then I read more of his stuff. There's also another book that came out, I think in 2014, that was Pathways to Peace, that brought together parenting and neurobiology and community as a way to create a more peaceful world, which also influenced some of this. So our brain is development is really dependent on experiences. So as social beings, our brains develop in relationships with each other. And that's a critical part of how our brains develop. So our brain is also built to categorize and simplify a very complex world. So there's a chair, I see a chair, my brain says, oh, I can sit on the chair, or I cannot sit on the chair. This is what a chair looks like. And so our brains are always, as we're growing up, categorizing the things we see around us and taking in all of that information at an unconscious level to try to make sense of a very complex world. If you think about our children who always drop things at a certain age because they're figuring out, I drop, it goes to the ground. That's what gravity looks like. They don't know the word gravity. But that's what we're always doing our whole lives, is categorizing to simplify a complex world. The other thing that happens with our brains, it's an anticipation machine. So if you think about how, from an evolutionary standpoint, our brains are what kept us safe from predators. So if we saw a tiger versus a bird, the tiger, through experience, we learn is a threat. The bird, well, if it's a giant bird, it might be a threat. But if it's a small bird, we might think, oh, that could be food for me, or I'm food for the tiger. So our brain is set up to anticipate and scan the environment for threats. So the amygdala keeps us safe, right? That fight, flight, freeze response, that comes from that evolutionary perspective. So we anticipate threats. And then repeated experiences create neural pathways that are more likely to be repeated, right? They're more likely to be activated in the future. So, for example, if I'm trying to think of a good example. My father used corporal punishment, right? We were spanked. So when he came home, I always was anticipating, the sort of anxiety would come up, and I'm anticipating he's coming home. And is everything put away? Does it look neat, right? That got activated in my neural pathways on a very regular basis. Because the irony is, when then I partnered with Rod job, and I was with him, who's, if anyone's met him, he's a very peaceful, Zen kind of guy, not as Zen as he appears, but he's very Zen, very peaceful. But when we first got together and we were living together, I noticed I would get anxious in that last hour before he came home. He had never said anything to me about what I did or didn't do, but those neural pathways had been activated so many times as a child that to me, I then began to associate male figure coming home, going to be mad if I don't wash the dishes. Right? It sounds ridiculous, but that's what would happen. So that's how our brains are developing when we're in relationships with those who have power over us, parents, caregivers, caretakers. And it is also how we even look at in-groups and out-groups. So if you think about racial dynamics, if you think about gender, we create stereotypes and biases because we tend to, as human beings, put people in in-groups and out-groups. Those who are like me are the in-group, and those who are not like me are the out-group. And so from a developmental or evolutionary perspective, that's often how bias is created. What's a threat, what's not a threat. So there are some biological pieces behind that. All right. So I often, and some of you have seen this before because I use this pyramid, when we're parents now and we're unschooling, one of the things that we are thinking about are how are we treating children? What's our external behavior with the child? We might also be thinking a lot about their behavior too, but this applies to them and to us. And so we look at our actions and behaviors, so, because our actions and behaviors have a direct impact on children. So we're looking at that surface. But what's below the surface is incredibly complex, and that's why it's hard to change our behavior. Because we all grew up socialized in power structures and control and domination over others who are less powerful. If you think about parent-child relationships, they're exactly that. That's a power structure. In our own homes, we may have experienced that very dramatically, or it may have been less dramatic. Everybody go to school in this room? Not Justin? A lot of people did, some people didn't. There's a power structure in schools. That trains our brains to operate and be within those power structures. So all of these experiences that we have as children and adults create this foundation, not only for our brains, right, but all of our experiences and memories. That's kind of the foundational piece. They also give rise to these subconscious beliefs and attitudes. Those are the things that are below the surface. Unconscious bias lies there, other things that we don't necessarily actively believe, they're still below that surface. And then we take on known beliefs and values. So mine, before the videotape, my known belief was I was very respectful and egalitarian. And then I saw a video of myself saying to Martel, I'm not going to talk to you if you speak that way to me. And if you want me to listen to you, you're going to have to speak politely. That was what was caught on video. Right? So my belief about myself was that I'm respectful, that I am about egalitarianism. But what showed up was he triggered me by what he said, and this subconscious stuff came up. And I reacted by saying those things. So our known values and beliefs are things that we grow up and we make a decision, this is what we want to be, this is who we want to be. As unschoolers, we all have taken on known values and beliefs about how we want to live with children, about the kinds of ways we want to interact with them. Below that, though, a whole bunch of subconscious crap, right? That's the crap that comes up, is everything that's below that. The other thing that happens is we have automatic thoughts. Now, how many of us love to pay attention to what our automatic thoughts are? Anybody? So you do pay attention, right?
Not all the time, but
Not all the time, but it's part of what you do to pay attention. Yeah.
it's depressing.
It's depressing, right?
It's not fun.
Do you ever have an automatic thought? Oh my God, he always does that, and it's, right? Like, oh wait, I'm supposed to be like peaceful. Wait. So those automatic thoughts are things that are often directly related to those subconscious beliefs and attitudes, and also our experiences. And then what happens is we have that thought and we go, oh, I'm not supposed to think that. And then we try to push that thought down, right? So we're always pushing down the crap because it's really uncomfortable to think that I really dislike the child in my life because he's acting in a way that goes against these subconscious beliefs about how children are supposed to behave that triggered me. So anyway, that's kind of, if you think about our experiences, our actions and behaviors as parents, they're really at the top of that pyramid, and everything else is below. So that's why I love let's dive in and look at that. So I'd love, I'd love to hear what societal stereotypes are about children as a group. Throw them out.
Impulsive.
What was that?
Impulsive.
Impulsive. Manipulative. Undisciplined. Disrespectful. Conniving. What was that? Messy? Yeah. I had a neat house before children. Time consuming. Lazy. Children should be seen and not heard. It's so easy to say all these stereotypes. Like they're right there on the surface. We heard those stereotypes about ourselves, right? Were we told some of these stereotypes ourselves in our own childhoods? But it's reinforced in the media all the time. It's reinforced when we're in the grocery store. It's reinforced when we go to our extended family's house, maybe. It's reinforced in so many places. So the stereotypes are easy to name, and we can say we don't believe in those. But those stereotypes informed our brain development. We heard them growing up. We were labeled in those ways. And it's why we often then react as parents to the behavior which we attach to the stereotype, which means children shouldn't be doing that, right? So we have the reaction. So that's how unconscious bias shows up often, is through those stereotypes. So if we think about our socialization is really how our society trains us up to be the people that they want us to be. The they, is vague, but we could talk about schools. We were talking about school systems as serving industrial capitalists in the early 1900s, and so school systems trained us up in particular ways. So when we're born into the world, all we're doing, this is really hard to read, I didn't know white wouldn't show up, but for the next ones. So what we're doing is we're born into the world, we're not a tabula rasa, we're not a blank slate, we come in with lots of things, but we are trained up. And you all know this because we're trying to do this differently by caregivers, teachers, religious figures, whatever it may be, in particular ways, usually within systems that use power over to control. Not everybody, but for the most part, the majority of us were. And then, so not only do we learn it from a very young age, we go into systems that train us that way, and then that's reinforced by our institutions and culture. So if we look at whether children have legal rights, they do not have legal rights. If we look at medical systems and how children are treated in medical systems, our parents have control over any kind of medical procedures. So legal systems, educational systems, all of our systems give adults more power legally and of course physically. When they're small, we have more power. So all of that's reinforced, power and control.
We're starting to give power over parents. If
Yes.
you see it socially happening, right? Schools want to step in and tell parents how to do things.
Right, right.
Systems,
Yeah.
homeschooling systems, like stuff.
Absolutely, yep. And then what happens is, as we grow older, and have you seen this in other teens, not necessarily unschooled teens, maybe in that, but how other teens reinforce those same things on younger children, right? We're trained up to say, oh, now that I'm older, I have the right to control younger children. I have the right to say you shouldn't do that. I have the right to do all those things. It's really a very effective, that's why socialization and enculturation works, because it's a very effective system that we're put into. So we teach other young people that power and control is how the world works, and they should adjust and expect that. And then what happens is it's just a cycle, and really at the center, when there's power and control and domination as a construct, as a way in which the world works, at the center are all of these kinds of things. So that's the challenge, is we know that in school systems, disconnection and competition and fear are a part of the system in general. We were talking about alternative school systems where that may not be the case, democratic school systems. Anyway. So that's our socialization. Any comments or thoughts? Yeah.
When you put that last circle up, and I just felt so much sadness. It just makes me so sad that there's
But that's our world. I mean, our world is effed up, right? I mean, you see it in our political, here in the United States, the current political environment
Right.
is this,
Yep.
right? It's fear, disconnection, competition, scarcity, right? It's us versus them, dehumanization, confusion, insecurity, right? All of that is happening here in the US, right? It's horrific. And I kind of think of them as funnels like this. So I think of that whole socialization coming down, and then there is the depressed, suicidal, unhappy, going, whatever, and then that's the teens coming out, and then it's into the 30s and 40s of therapy, fix yourself, addictions, or whatever. Like they might do therapy, or they might just be unhappy, divorce,
Right.
whatever. Like it's just these funnels that keep feeding each other,
Yeah.
right? They're just a perpetual cycle.
So that's a positive. This is where we got into the really heavy topic part.
I know, right?
So-
I have 3 children who I am working hard to not
Right.
do that right. And that's the one thing I can try.
Yeah.
This is our mental
And most people don't even realize that that's what's going on.
Right.
No, you don't,
Exactly.
it's not
And
it. Well, we
you're
are taught introspection.
Yep, it's all subconscious.
And it's so accepted.
Right. Exactly. It is also how we end up in,
Accepted and enforced.
yeah, around whether it's socioeconomic status or race or sexual orientation, gender identity, all of those constructs, all those identities. Being a child, age is one of those constructs that we've decided. I mean, clearly children are in a developmental process. We're in a developmental process. But physically, of course, we know as parents there's things we need to do to support them, to care for them. But it's the construct of power over because they are less powerful, then we have the right to do that. That really is then this concept of adultism. That's the structure that's created around children. And so there's another book that's out that's called Childism. Ageism is another one. I worked around some issues of ageism, but ageism to me has always been addressing discrimination against those who are older or elderly. And so this term adultism, many people have used it, but in particular, Barry Checkaway is one that I had read that influenced my thinking about working with youth and what that looks like. And so adultism is really this concept that comes out of this structure that says that adults, it's all the behaviors and attitudes that flow from the assumption that adults are better than children. And that as a result, we get to act upon children. And we get to control them and use our power. And that we have then we reserve the right to punish, to threaten, to discipline, to take away privileges, as a way to train them up or discipline them. So adultism is all it's similar to the ways in which racism works or sexism, and it hasn't necessarily been recognized as a form of oppression. And I think it's because all of us experience that and we accept it as such a normal part of life. But my fundamental belief is that form, if we think about the neural pathways being activated multiple times that I said earlier, that really gives rise then to other forms. Because then what I grow up believing is that when I become more powerful, I have the right to control. And how many of us struggle with that now? Like I was told as a child, right? When you get to be the adult, you get to make the rules. When you pay the bills, you get to make the rules. When you move out of the house, you get to make the rules. So we wait till the time when we can make the rules, and then we're like, well, that's not working. Because the children go, no way, I'm not going to accept your rules. So that's our whole process then of trying to work through that and to create something different.
I mean, people anticipate the teen years being hard, right? They anticipate it. Like I deal with a lot of Muggle folks, but I would say Muggle. But conventional parents, and they just the teen, and everybody's like from yes. And I'm just like, but why do we believe that has to be like that? To me, it's horrific, right? It makes me very sad, and I happen to deal with a lot of people who are not doing what I do. Right?
Yes.
by 2 months old, right? You know, like all of these terrible things that are not child focused.
Right. Yep. Yeah.
When my nephew turned 20, and he had a terrible time in school, just terrible. So I thought he would be understanding of my kids who are younger and not in school. And I hear him in the other room, sort of, you know, like my hearing just perked up, and I hear him say something like, well, you know, you are going to have to go to school if you ever want a job.
No.
And I thought, really? Even him? But of course him.
Yeah.
Because he was slammed
He
for
got-
not doing well. And then he grew up with this whole, like, well, I'm not smart enough, I didn't do well, I couldn't say what I wanted. And instead of saying, oh, this isn't right, he said, no, now I have to do it to, you know, the little ones who are innocently enjoying themselves, whatever. And he was told by his mom that, you know, homeschooling makes weirdos and these weird. So I couldn't believe it from his, what I thought was a very tender, open heart, had been changed in a matter of time. And now he was saying, oh, you two, you will need to go to school.
Yeah.
Isn't it the belief more than instead of adults are better, but the argument that adults know better?
I think
That
it's
are better, right?
Right.
That we know better because we have life experience, so we want to protect our children from things, and that's why sometimes we just do it not because we're better, but we want because we think we know better.
right.
So we don't trust our kids, obviously because we were not trusted.
Right.
Yeah, but maybe there's that distinction that it's not that I feel that I'm better, but I know better. As
Yeah.
a mother.
Yeah.
But my best lessons have always been learned when I have made my own mistakes and learned the lesson. I have never, and I will say never, learned a lesson that someone told me that I needed, right? And I think our whole society now is all about, let's just give them tons of information and tell them all the things they shouldn't do, and then they'll be all set up, and yet we've essentially removed the experimentation and the trial and error and the mistakes, right? And so now we have kids making really big mistakes much later because they were never granted the chance earlier.
But even
Right.
now I have to be like, so even now, okay, fine, I'll give you the choice. And then they learn, and I'm like, see, I told you so.
Yeah.
And stopping yourself from the next, you know, mistake. And
But you know, you'll see in 6 months, a year, that will go away. Like you'll be like, wow, I didn't even face it, right? You know, and you'll be like, wow, I have changed. You know, like I can breathe through it, and that's okay. Or your kids will look at you and say, Mom, go through your process, and then let me do. My kids do that. My kids are like, you go ahead and have, you know, you can have that loud voice, you know, and whatever, but stop talking to me that way, and they move along, you know. And I love, you know, that's valuable, right? And they'll see that you're trying, and you come back and say, yeah, I didn't really like the way I interacted with you. That wasn't what I was trying to do. I really wanted to give you the choice.
Yeah.
And you know what? Kids are amazingly forgiving.
And a sorry is such a great thing.
You know, because that model
We never got a sorry.
appropriate behavior. I am not all knowing. That's important. I am not. Like I always say, I may know more, but I'm 49 years old. I know more because I've lived in this world longer, but I don't know better.
Yeah.
Right?
But I think the challenge is that because we're socialized so strongly that adults do need to know. And I would say, I think there's, you know, just in the way that we might think of privilege around race or gender, it's adult privilege.
Yeah.
Right? We have privilege to be in the world, to drive, to vote, to do all the
Yes,
things,
there are.
right? That's in some ways invisible to us and is not, it is very apparent to children.
Right.
Right? The power we have to manipulate our environment as adults is very different than what children have. The power of the state to act upon children and us if we're not doing what we're supposed to do. I mean, those are all the ways, I think, in which it shows up. And there's pressure to know. Because as parents, that's what we grow up believing. Because we didn't necessarily hear our parents say, I don't know. So
there's a sense of, I feel, society almost accepts a sense of ownership that we have over our kids. My kid he goes to Sudbury School, as you know, Teresa. And we were doing like a farm market, open house or whatever. So this lady comes up and she's talking to my son, and then she turns to me and she says, "Is he yours?" I said, "No, he's not mine." I'm his father, but he's not mine. It's the mindset that we have,
Right,
that
right.
it's socially accepted. You quote own them,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
As opposed to I'm just privileged to have had them,
Mhm.
right? They've come to this earth through us,
Right.
and that's just a privilege. I just want to get the heck out of the way.
Yeah.
They're going to look at you anyway. They're
Right.
going to want to follow you. They look at you as like all-powerful gods when they're that young, because they depend completely upon you.
Mhm.
And that gives us the sense of power over them. We've never had it before. Never.
Right.
And it is so hard to walk away.
It
It's
is.
not that
It
easy.
is. Yeah. Yeah.
But I think it also ties in with what Peter Gray was saying with his research, is that our essential nature is hunter-gatherers. For the longest time, that's how we function. And when you look at traditional society, that's how they function. They let their little kids use knives because they're right there, and they know the older kids will be there, and the other people will be there. Everybody's still ability to kind of
Mhm.
help each other. But ever since agriculture came along and said, nope, all right, we gotta harness the kids and have as many as we can and make them do farm work, and it just came from there. And so now everybody still does that. It's the adults are at the top, you tell the kids what to do, and the kids are useful, and they're property, right? Like we own them. It goes along with owning the farm, the whole, all of that.
Yeah.
I think that whole disconnect came. We're still doing that even though we're not farmers. We don't have like 6 kids working on a farm, but
Yeah.
we still think that way.
Yeah. And if you think about our societal constructs, there are always ways in which legally, historically, people have been owned, right? And we own children.
Yeah.
And that's the reality of history and the society that we live in. I saw a hand here. Yeah.
It's interesting from a certain perspective, and I'm looking at baby boomers. In my generation of kids, we grew up with like a lot of, like I would never ever have said anything nasty to my mother. Like my daughter, when I'm combing her hair, she'll get up and leave because it hurts. My mother says that I would sit there with my tears running down my face. So today's kids, even though they're under that society, they are aware of rights that they have way more than when I was younger.
Absolutely.
So our society moves at a glacial pace. But the positive end of that is that everyone may not change, and some of the stuff that's really bad doesn't seem to ever change, but it does move along. We have a black president.
Right, right.
So, I don't know if the baby boomer parenting did anything other than to tell kids that you have some rights. I'm not on school yet, and they weren't unschooling at all, but I just do know that kids are way more likely to say, you're stupid, mom. Whereas when I was a kid, you wouldn't even hint at that.
Yeah.
So in some ways it made it harder on themselves because the society is still the same. But they know their rights more.
So, we've been having this discussion on another group, and this follows from what you're saying, is that, I want to put it out there, is that it's time, I want to propose, that we start talking about adultism and childism in the same way we talk about racism and homophobia and sexism and classism. In fact, when we look at we watch a TV series and this guy, he really dislikes children, and it's okay. You say it's just a child, and then I always say, okay, let's just change that and say, oh, she's just a woman, or she's just a gay, and then you find it really offensive. And so I think that it's not enough that we treat social justice begins in our homes. So we have to do the work internally and in our homes. But I really think it's not enough that we need to start talking about it and creating a bigger awareness that these practices are
sometimes that's what I'm talking about, that you do need to say something about someone's parenting sometimes. Isn't that what you're talking about?
No, I'm saying, I don't know, I mean, the strategies and how we go forward is, if we say, okay, right, we need to move beyond our own thoughts, right? Then the strategies is something we will discuss. So, like, I mean, a simple example I'm thinking of is, there's very little children's literature where kids don't get sent to their room, for instance.
Right. Right.
So that normalizes the thing. So when you write a book review on Amazon or wherever, you know, you say there's so much adultism in, you know, within the book because there's these examples, and then someone's going to say, oh, well, adultism, and, you know, check it out and Google it. So we talk about all these literature books that our kids, all kids are exposed to, where adult oppression is normalized, or oppression of children is normalized, you know. So it's a safe space to talk about it, like literature, you know, that kind of thing. I don't know, like, I mean, I have family members that are racist, and I don't know how to deal with them, so I don't know how we can deal with,
Right, so you're speaking
you know,
about like
so,
institutions and the leading edge.
yeah, it was, you know, so it just needs to
Baby
be
steps.
baby steps, yeah, without getting into the mommy wars and, you know, I don't know the strategy. I'm just saying, if we make it like a concerted effort about talking about it more, not just in our circles, and saying, oh, you know, or as a doctor, you know, that's, like, you know, we say that's an art privilege that I don't choose to practice. You know, my child is agency or use the words.
Oh, I say that, linking up with all.
Yeah.
I don't know the solutions, like, for the system, we need to start talking about it outside of our safe spaces.
No, I think that's very fair.
I was thinking what a dynamic conversation this would be if there were a level in here, you know, because we're all like preaching to the choir.
But I think what I would say is that we're preaching to the choir, and yet we all are still struggling.
Exactly.
Right? And so the more, this is what I would say, the more compassion, the more that I am willing to acknowledge my own struggles with it, the more that I am self-compassionate. How many of you beat yourself up when you are not behaving toward a child in the ways that you want to? Right? We all, what I believe, whether I'm doing a workshop and it's about microaggressions or racism or whatever it is, I am always in my journey. And so what I have to understand is that my own ability to show compassion for where someone may be at is dependent on how much compassion I show myself in my own journey, right? The more that I am sort of not clear and clean, the more that I then tend to preach or I tend to be, you know, come out in a way that is not compassionate about the fact that we're talking about unconscious bias because it's unconscious. And we're talking about stuff that is within our own development that is below the surface. And so my own journey as a parent actually helped me to do, I'm biracial, so my mother's Japanese and my dad is white, right? And so my own struggle in my life has been, what does that mean in terms of my own racial identity? But then I also had to understand, what did I need to learn being half white? Like, what does that mean in this world? And the same thing about parenting. I thought I had studied systems of oppression and social justice, and yet the perpetuation of that on the children in my life was intense. And so I created within them and my relationship injustice. So if I've done 15 years of work to then say, oh, you know, I have to be compassionate with others in their own journey. Because it's always under the surface. We're not aware. Yeah. Let's go here.
Yeah, and that reminds me, that answers that question. How do we do it? We do it starting with ourselves, because there's a huge butterfly effect that happens with that, you know, the amount of consciousness that's being raised and all these big societal changes that are happening. We just keep chipping away at it. Eventually there's this thing that gets to the point.
And you know,
I can't stop evolution.
Right. Yeah.
I have
let me go over here. Let me go over here and here. Yeah.
And I'm more on the environmental issues part of things,
Mhm.
where with all the discussions we've ever had is nobody changes when you make them feel better. change may happen tomorrow because someone feels guilty, but it's not long lasting. And when you want someone, when in my area, when you want someone to really understand stuff that you want them to understand, is you take them from where they are. Because if you don't understand where they are, you're not going to get there.
I think you become attractive. I think what you do is you live a freaking life that somebody wants a piece of, right? And that's the life I'm living, and it's becoming attractive. And people are interested in what we're up to because they see how freaking happy our family is, right? And they're like, dude, I want some of that. How do I get that? And I have looked at people in this room to try and gain the same capabilities from them because I have run into these types of folks before, and that's what I want. So I want a piece of that. I want kids who are confident like that, right? And I think that what you do is you live what you want to put out, right? And that energy, the vibrational energy is attractive, hugely attractive, right? And that to me is worth more than anything. And it's amazing. You can become the Pied Piper, right? And I don't care if people come to where I am. I may be way down the path, but I slowly can just have little pieces where they're like, hey, maybe I'll change this one behavior, right? So I'm starting to equate some of this with religion. I'm not a religious person. I'm actually very anti-religion. However, everything I am doing in this life is bringing me to a spirituality that is very religion-like. It's church, right? It is community and church. And it's really freaking me out, right? Because I do not really take on monotheistic religion in any way, shape, or form. I have an issue with it. I don't diss anyone that does it, so please don't take that as a bad thing. However, I'm blown away that the one thing that I have disliked all of my life is zealotry, right? And I'm becoming a zealot in some ways, right? But I'm not becoming a preachy zealot. I'm becoming a person who is living a life that other people want, right? That other people would aspire to. And I think there's a huge amount of energy. Sorry.
Oh, that's all right.
So I just would like to know some recommendations from going from unconscious to conscious.
Yeah.
Without having to go to psychology.
All right. So let's so I'll go on and address that because that's further. So I'm just going to go quickly through these. But if we think about the impact of adultism and unconscious bias on adults, one of the things I think that's really critical that's going to tie in to answer your question is that we've internalized that about ourselves as children. So all the messages that we heard, all the stereotypes that you all named, we heard those directed at us when we were children. What that does to us is create pain. Maybe trauma with a small t. Could be trauma with a big T, depending on, what you've experienced. So the one thing is to also be aware. So we're often unaware that biases drive our actions because we don't see the bigger system. And then that results in microaggressions toward children. We also have unresolved and unintegrated emotions from our childhoods. That's often the biggest block to moving forward are those unresolved and unintegrated emotions that get triggered in us. So I'm gonna, has anyone heard the term microaggressions before? So some of it may be related to race. It's often used in terms of race or gender or sexual orientation. But I'm applying a lot of this to our relationships with children because it's really the same impact. Although much of the research is more around race, unconscious bias around other forms. And I will post this. I know people are taking notes. I will post this on the group. So I'll post the PowerPoint. But microaggressions come out of unconscious bias. So if you think about, have you ever had an adult say to your child when they say thank you, "You're so polite," right? Or what's the magic word? It's not a direct sort of negative, like, you're an idiot, kind of thing. Not you. You sit next to me, so I'm going to point towards you a lot. It's called a micro because it's small. But that doesn't mean it's not felt, right? So they're subtle, they're indignities, instead of the question that you got at the fair, where, oh, is he yours or she yours? In essence, that's a microaggression because, was it your daughter or your son? Your son isn't his own person. He's a product of you. He's yours. You should be proud of him. In some ways, that's a slight, that's a microaggression. And they're not these microaggressions don't come out of negative people who are all about putting down children. They think they're being very nice when they say those things, right? But the impact, so I am going to get to your question, but the impact, based on some of the research, is that it does have an impact on your ability to thrive in an environment. So when you're experiencing those kinds of microaggressions, you take that in. They can also create physical health problems. It also continues to saturate the broader, it's a reinforcing cycle. Oh, is he yours? That just reinforces this belief that children are owned by adults. But there's individual impacts. And the reason I'm bringing these up is because we experience these as children. So these are the experiences we've had. Did you have your hand up?
Yeah, I just had a question. These things trigger me
Yeah.
so bad. I really struggle with it because I just want to lash out. And I have people, friends, that do this to my kids.
Mm-hmm.
And it drives me nuts.
Yeah.
And my husband's not as in tune with it. He doesn't really understand what it bothers me sometimes. But like, how do you handle that? Like, it's not the environment that I do with my children, but like, the rest of the world is out there. We can't just like, I love to live in the bubble, and it's just everything we do, but do you have any like?
So does it happen? So I think to me it depends on context. So if I'm in the store, that's one thing.
It happens in the store.
It happens with extended family.
It happens with friends. We don't have
With friends, yeah. So one of the things that I really try to focus on is what's happening with the child. Because I have my whole view of what their experience is based on my life, right? So my life, when I told the story of my dad coming home, right, in that hour before I get all anxious, that's not his life. Because I don't come home and say, why didn't you wash the dishes? I say that to Rob, but I know. But if you think about it, this is what I try to do. I try to check in with Martell or Grayson when something has happened, just to see. How did they experience that? Because for them, it may be a very small thing, or it may be a big thing, right? Sometimes we underestimate the impact, and sometimes we overestimate the impact. So often what I will do is really focus on what's the experience the child is having. I'm triggered because that's how I was treated, because I have those soft spots, right? Of that pain, what happened to me that I wasn't able to resolve with my own parents or a teacher or whatever it is, somebody who treated me in a certain way when I was a child, but they have a different experience in their lives with you. So, for example, with my in-laws, at 14, they can't believe my son can read, and because he never went to school and I didn't teach him how to read. He learned how to read. So they still often make him read his birthday cards to prove that he can read. At 14, although some children might not read until 11 or 12, right? And so part of it is that he knows that's who they are. So the relationship he builds with them is very different. And so my goal is to try to understand that. And not to necessarily put my own triggered reaction on it, like I have to deal with that. It's an opportunity for me to say, what's triggered in me? Like what's painful for me? And then how am I mindful? What are my automatic thoughts? How am I feeling? What's happening in my stomach? I don't know, some people clench their jaw, you might be clenching your jaw, your stomach.
Sometimes even my kids will just stand there and like look at them
like you're an idiot, right?
Right, and
Or
they're
like,
silent and like, because they're just like,
right.
Take it really
Yeah.
seriously.
Mm-hmm.
And it's that whole like you have to say please thing. And
Right.
well, why don't you tell my son like, why don't you tell her what I need to hear? And she's just like, so can I ride in the car? Or not?
Yeah.
And I'm standing there like, can I just use this? Because it's ridiculous because you don't say please every single time you ask me for something.
Right, right.
And like, and it's hard because I'm like, so do I
I just say nothing? She's just like, I'm very challenged. It's like those social situations that you're in where I'm like, I can't understand all of this, but I just,
Do you want to have that conversation with your friend?
not at the moment.
What I do is I have that, I write it out, I write out the conversation. I can't believe you said it, and I write it in with, so I can get out the feeling.
Get it out, right.
Because that's the trigger. That's not them, that's me.
Right.
So I get it out, and then I look at it, and I see where can I turn it around to, I'm now doing that. I'm now doing what I say, I don't want them to. I'm saying, these, you should say please, you should,
Right.
what you're doing the opposite, you're saying you should say please, you should. So it's kind of like a dynamic where you get to see where your trigger is actually causing you to suffer, where they don't even know. They don't even know how much it's hurting them.
No, I don't.
But it's an opportunity for us to be.
Yeah, and I
aware.
can see that, but it's like for our children.
Well, like Teresa's saying,
Yeah.
you don't give
You
me
don't know what
that.
your kids are.
Check in with them, like you're saying, check in with them.
So what I might say in that situation is, yeah. So 6 and 4. I might say something like, so I give them room. For example, when they were 6 and 4, they may not have wanted to go over to their grandfathers or their grandmothers. So I'm like, okay, you don't want to go, that's fine, don't go. Or I might say, do you want to, or do you enjoy it, or what do you think? You know, or what did you think of what happened? Sometimes I have to work through my own stuff first before. Otherwise, I'm like, what do you think? I thought that. You know. Right. Did you see what he said to you? I can't believe he said that to you. You should be mad. You, why don't you matter? You know, right? Exactly. I'm like, gosh, don't you know how disrespectful that was? And there are times when they definitely feel the disrespect, and they might need to talk about it. So my father-in-law, my son was playing a game on my father-in-law's iPad, and he did something, and my father-in-law yelled at him. He yells during football games all the time, and so he doesn't like to go over during football games, but he yelled, he was watching a football game. He apologized to him later, and he said something like, why did you do that, blah, 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 blah. So I was watching it happening, and it was painful for me to watch it happen, and then later on, we were in the car, and all of a sudden, Grayson just comes out and he says, I am so mad at Papa because he did this, right? I didn't know what the impact was, but we had also built up enough where I might ask, how did that go? What did you think? How are you feeling about that? You know, those sorts of things, to just begin to help them to actually understand their own inner experience. Because that's part of what we're doing, is helping them to process, because when they experience an action that's oppressive or disrespectful, it could be painful, it could not be. We can try to help them understand what that is. Did you have a reaction to that? Did it bother you? Are you okay with it? You know, it can be leading a little bit, but sometimes the language is helpful.
I think you hit on a key point there, right? What I've found is that once you look at the emotional trigger, because it's your emotional trigger, and you resolve it, that experience disappears.
Right.
It just goes away.
Right.
Yeah.
If you try to make what's out there change, it's like shaving, looking in the mirror, trying to shave the guy in the mirror. And what's interesting is, because we're raising our kids very differently, right? We hope that they feel free to come and talk to you.
Mm-hmm.
When they have a trigger, they're going to come and talk to you, and you can help them resolve that. What we need to work on, get rid of our triggers.
Yeah.
Then it just kind of.
Because I'm aware, I'm very self-aware that it's my trigger. I know it's my
Yeah.
that, and it's just, I look at it, I'm like, well, what about, like, is this affecting them? No. And I'm like, and that's where the, you know, the protectiveness comes out in me, where I'm like, this one, I don't want you to feel what I'm feeling. It's
Right,
outside.
right.
So,
But I think what happens
Good,
is
they
we,
tell you.
we start, because like I get a trigger like that too, and then Michael's older now and they can really articulate, Mom, that's your trigger.
Yeah.
Okay, but it's really helpful because we've built that relationship and they can tell me exactly, you know, they're free to tell me. I was not free to tell my parents or grandparents any of that. That's why I have that trigger. But because they have that freedom, they're not going to have that pain that we did. Even if it bothers them that their grandparents say, you know, gotta say please or whatever, it's just going to become annoying. Like, oh yeah, grandma's like that.
Right.
It's not going to be this, oh my God, I was stifled, I couldn't say anything. It was because they'll have an outlet. They have people that they have a
You saw that,
It's so
right? it's almost always something from my upbringing, and I
I've kind of seen that happen from an opposite perspective with my boys. Like my father would say something to them, and I said I had a relationship with my parents. They don't second guessing me, but it's a different style. But I took on the pain for them, and I felt I had to apologize for my father. I'm like, look, I'm sorry, Grandpa treated you that way. He said that, and the response came back was like, it's okay, that's Grandpa. I still love him. So it was definitely me. He felt nothing. He was oblivious. That's a grandpa, and that's just
how he acts.
yeah. But to be able to at least open the dialogue for him to express himself.
One of the things that Daniel Siegel says in his book about neurobiology and how we develop in relationships is that the most critical thing we can do is to be in the relationship with the child or with another person, and that person helps us make meaning of the experience. And when there's that space to make meaning of the experience, to process it in essence, that is when integration happens. We get triggered because we've experienced all those things. So some of these impacts, we question our self-worth and value, we second guess ourselves. We might mistrust others as a result of experiences where we were treated in particular ways. We might think a lot. How many of you think a lot about what you've said and when you mess something up, and kind of goes over and over and over, There's feelings of powerlessness. So what happens is in those situations, our own powerlessness gets triggered, and the pain that we feel from that is still unintegrated. So in fact, the journey, I think, of this parenting that we're doing, and I think of the work, is that we are beginning to integrate our own experiences and emotions in ways that we didn't have an opportunity to do as children. So let me go over here and then I'll,
I also, speaking to your audience, feel like the kids develop a unique relationship to the person who's doing that thing. And sometimes I talk to a lot of parents, I was a mentor parents, and sometimes the mom comes to me and she says, how do I get my husband on board? And what I've heard a lot is that she'll try to cut the relationship or step in between the relationship between the child and the father, or the child and the grandparent to protect the child, right? And I think you underestimate your child when you do that, because I have literally seen my daughter, like she goes to give her a hug and kiss to grandma at night, and then grandma goes, "Where's my hug and kiss?" And she'll go, "Well, I don't feel like kissing you because you teased me." And he's like, put on notice, because he's been teasing her all day long.
Right,
She's
right.
like, bye.
Yeah.
And I have to let grandpa sit with that for a minute.
Yep. And my youngest does that. My mother-in-law does a lot of that. You haven't hugged me. So he has started running toward, if I'm in the room, he'll run toward her and then he'll veer back around and hug me. Right? Because every single time she was right behind us in the house, she tries to get him to hug. And he's like, I am not going to do what I don't want to do. So he teases her by doing that. And it's true. They develop that relationship. When they're much younger, we do feel very protected because we're vulnerable at that age. And often it's at the age where we're most triggered. We probably had a lot of experiences at that age. But they do develop. When they've got this foundation, they develop this ability to negotiate relationships, I think, in ways that are completely different from what certainly I have experienced. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Oh.
I guess the question I had, right, was that I think a lot about things that I know have hurt them, etc. What are the things that I've said that I don't know have hurt them? That's the problem. That's the unconscious part. How do you even figure that out?
Right. Because what are you afraid of?
So, it's a long list. Look, like I was just talking to my son the other day, and we were talking about, there were a bunch of parents, this is the same, the open house at the school, and they were talking about, how do you know that your kid is learning? So my son was right there, and this is the way he is, you met him, he's like, well, why do you need to know I'm learning? So I started playing that role. I was like, because I want you to succeed. Why do you want me to succeed? Because it's my responsibility that you learn. I was playing the game with him, but the point is, it's interesting because this style of parenting, right, is all about self. You know, what was that? Excavation. Who made that? Who used that term the other day? You're constantly trying to become aware of who you are. It's what it's all about, right?
Right.
That's not an easy thing to do because of the unconscious bias. The problem is that you're not aware of the impact that you're having on her. And too often, no matter how evolved we might feel, our parents raised us in what they felt was the most evolutionary way it was compared to their parents.
Right.
So how do we figure out those? I have no clue.
But is perfection the goal? I don't think it is.
No, I didn't say that, right?
No, I'm just saying,
It's
but I don't
simply
think it is.
figuring out
you know.
what we are doing, the impact that we're having on it.
Whatever
There is no goal.
triggers you, whatever triggers us as parents, that's part of our unconscious.
And I also think I'll have different impact on each one of my children.
Yeah.
Each one is going to take on different things. Like, they're different personalities, right?
And they trigger us differently.
They trigger
yeah.
you.
So I think one of the things is your desire is to never do any harm. Right? That's our desire.
Right? Do no harm.
Is to never do any harm.
Right.
You're gonna do it.
That's too late.
Yeah.
Now I say that lightly, but it's the truth is, I don't always know the harm that I'm gonna do. But what I can do is hope to cultivate open enough relationship that when the harm happens, that I know, that the feedback comes back, whether it's verbal, nonverbal, or sometimes I have gone and said, wow, I was really, whatever the word I might use in that moment. You know, I will go back and say, gosh, I was so grouchy, I was really angry, I was upset, and I'll go to Martel and I'll say something and I'm like, what are you talking about? Right? And there's other times when he's like, yeah, you were.
It's the communication.
It is the communication. Because that's it. Because in your partner relationship, do you hurt each other?
Yeah. Never happened. We've been married 24 years.
So if you're with a friend or a partner, it's the same thing. You say things that hurt someone. Hopefully you have a relationship that they care enough about and you care enough about that you come back to it.
But I think it also raises the issue of if they're going to be parents one day or married, whatever, that they don't have this expectation that they have to be absolutely perfect, that you were fallible, and the point is that they don't have that, oh my God, I gotta be like mom, my dad. Instead,
Seriously?
so they
I
have
gotta
that
be back. That's not a problem here. I gotta be back to that.
So if they have that communication, then you know, if you have, then they'll have that, and they'll strive to have that, which I think is a lot better than just trying to be perfect and never hurt intentionally. Because I never got the sorries from my parents, and that hurts very badly. And I have said sorry to my children, and I have gone to them and said, I didn't mean to be like that. Oh man, I really blew up. Sorry, but you know, I am human, and it just, you know, people get angry. It's an emotion that people have, and you get frustrated, and you know, there are right ways to handle it. But that's what pointing out that you made a mistake with it helps them know that you're still growing as a human being. You're not this. Okay, when I'm like 43, I'm gonna be perfect, just like my mom. I'm never gonna blow up or anything. That's not possible.
And
to have that kind of expectation as for them to grow up to be like that is wrong. So.
And what I would say is Martel's much more forgiving of me than I am of myself.
That's I feel the same way.
So when I have gone and said, this is what happened, this is why I was triggered, and he'll be like, Mom, we're all human.
Yeah.
And so,
Or I'll get a hug.
yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So, and then.
Is that why after there's been an altercation between parent and child, they just go off and they're fine, and then you've got this problem for like hours later?
Yeah.
You're still
The other day, I went to the
That was
bathroom
over.
to apologize to my daughter, and she immediately was like, "It's okay." I'm like,
What do you mean it's okay?
"I don't think you understand."
You don't know how bad that was. It's
that you're
true.
doing.
Yeah.
So how do you know if nobody's telling you that you're doing this to your child? How do you know that you're doing it?
Oh, my kids tell me.
Well,
Like,
Yeah, but
you
what
do.
if your children?
So what if they don't, right? What if they're not? Some children are very verbal. My older son's very verbal, younger one not so. He'll go when he's mad at me, and that drives me. That's really difficult for me because I want to like tell me. So this is what happens. I think the process that you can use that really works around any kind of unconscious bias, in a sense, is I'm going to move to what Daniel Siegel suggests. I'm just going to go. One of the big things that we can do is pay attention to our bodies. I just want to tell you this. Pay attention to our bodies. Pay attention to your automatic thoughts. Like, you know how we joke that we don't always like the thoughts that are going through our heads? Often, that's the way to know when unconscious bias is running. Because a thought will pop into your head, and you'll immediately cover it over with a more acceptable thought.
Yeah.
Right? This happens across race. This is what happens with children. So what I really try to do is, one, when I'm triggered, it usually always hits my stomach. Where's your point? Where's your physical point? How do you know when something's going on for you? Because the discomfort that your body feels, it's going to feel it first. And your mind, of course, is racing. But paying attention to those automatic thoughts really is something that will help you uncover what's going on. So that writing down, you suggested writing down. I often, after a situation, when I was first really trying to work through these things, is I would write down every automatic thought that came into my head. They were kind of ugly. But that's what's running under the surface. And so the more that I could then say, oh, look, I think he's an idiot. Oh, look, he's doing that again. Oh, look, he's, whatever the words are, he should, whatever it is, those automatic thoughts triggered, oh, something's going on for me. What's below that? And so the discomfort that I get in my stomach, even when I'm working on unconscious bias around other issues, that's where I feel it. So where might you be feeling it? Where does it sit in your body? What are you sensing in your body? And then start paying attention to your thoughts. What are your thoughts? Write them down. They're not pretty. They don't need to be. Because you know what? You were trained. Your brain was trained that way. It works really well. You survived. You're living, right? You avoided all those threats. Our brains are going to do that. And I think if we can accept that we're in that place, that happens with everyone, the judgment that we put on ourselves allows us to open it up more. Allows us to say, these are all the things I learned about what it means to treat children in a certain way, to treat myself in that way. So that's, if I were to give you a technique, it really is using that mindful awareness around your body, what are your automatic thoughts, where do you feel discomfort immediately, and then begin to just create a space around that so that you can peel it back a little bit more. Right, yeah.
So before you once you started this, and you felt yourself yelling and screaming, would you step back, go to a room? Like, how do you not then spew out the ugliness?
Sometimes it spews out. So I just want to say that, right? Sometimes it still spews out. Sometimes it would be an issue that would keep coming up. I don't know if people have ever had this, right? There's an issue around food that keeps coming up every single day. Like, oh, there's something for me to work on. So often what I would do, depending on age, when they're very young and all they want to do is be, depending, they might either want to be way away from you or close up, I might just need to breathe, and sometimes that did not work. So I just want to say the breathing technique, yeah, sometimes I got so mad by the end of that, I'd still let it out. But for me, it was a gradual process of being comfortable with discomfort, because we learn to avoid discomfort. Just like that automatic thought, so like I might just say to myself in my head, Grayson's like throwing stuff, he's 4 and he's throwing shit all over the floor, and I'm like, I am so uncomfortable watching this happen. Like I often talk in my head. Sometimes it comes out verbally, it comes out loud, and people say, what did you just say? So often I will talk the thoughts to myself that are running through my head so I can acknowledge that they're there. and to be okay, like how long can my discomfort last? Because we want to ease the discomfort, sometimes that means the yelling comes out. I used to yell a lot more because I was afraid of my anger. So I bottled up my anger, and then the yelling would come out. Because when my dad was angry, it was scary and sometimes not safe. So for me, anger, I work with a lot of people who have anger issues because I have anger issues, and I was afraid of anger. So I also began to think, how can I see anger as a friend? I hated my anger because I learned to hate anger. I was afraid of anger. So my ability to say, what am I most afraid of? The reason I asked you, what are you afraid of? Hurting, doing harm. Like, what are you most afraid of? I'm afraid I'm going to get angry and hit him. That's hard to admit to yourself, right? Who wants to say, I might hit my son? I was hit, I don't ever want to be hit. So the more that I just admit to myself, that's sometimes what the impulse is, and just open that up, the more that I could forgive myself. And just say, that's a product of what my environment was. That's a product of how my brain works. And I can learn it differently.
I just wanted to add that just because you're getting triggered and feeling angry at the time doesn't mean that there isn't a problem. And that it's not okay. Don't tell yourself it's not okay to be upset. Because of course you can be upset. You're human, you're going to get upset about things. Just take a minute, and there must be a solution to this. And so it's letting it, not the spewing part, stop that. But it's okay to have a problem. It's okay to be upset about something. So, because I feel like people, when they start feeling this way, it's like, you're not allowed to be angry. You can't be upset about anything. Everything has to be okay. You have to be peaceful all the time. So when I first started getting into unschooling and peaceful parenting, I thought, I'm never going to get mad again. All the time, there's going to be a problem, and we're just going to live in harmony. And it's not true. So allowing yourself to feel real human emotions, yeah, otherwise you will explode, which I did.
I don't know if anybody's read Robin Grill's Parenting for a Peaceful World or not. He came to Tucson and he wrote a great book, A Historical View of Childhood and how we can make a more peaceful world. And he said, I hate when people tell me my book is called Peaceful Parenting for a Peaceful World because there's nothing peaceful about parenting. It's not peaceful. I mean, but so I guess that's really where, for me, is like, how do I allow myself the full range of emotions that I was not allowed to have as a child? And so the ones that my parents shut down the most, which they could express with abandon, were the ones that I had the hardest time with, and allowing myself to fully feel it, and then also learn that I didn't have to act on it. But honestly, I still yell. It's much less.
For me, when I first started becoming conscious of doing these kinds of mindfulness, exercises, the stuff would start coming out of my mouth. I would be watching myself say it.
Right. It's like your objective third party.
And thinking, stop it. But no, it was still coming out. And there was a long time that I was at that stage. I learned a lot from it because I noticed my patterns. I noticed, but there was a long time when the stuff was coming out. I was watching it happen. I was thinking, no, this is not what I want to be doing. But, and it's just a process.
Right.
It takes time.
And then the reconnection and the going back is the thing. That's what we learn. Whether in any relationship, it comes out, we don't mean it, we're triggered, hurt happens, and then we reconnect and rebuild. And often the I don't want to minimize harm, right? We're talking about really shifting, but I also don't want us to ever walk out of this room thinking that there's some expectation to be here when all we are is human. And the more human we are and reconnect human being to human being, the stronger the relationships. And the more then we build something upon which then they move forward with. And that we move forward with in a positive way. Oh, let's go here and then Kathy. It's all right.
What's your name? Christina.
I live my life by watching myself living and just saying everything I don't want to say all the time. And as a parent, of course, I think your book was the most shaking experience for me. I just realized that everything I thought I was doing was
was not at all. I was full of, you know, no. But I've learned to tell my daughters. So first of all, regarding the grandparents' husband's issues, after reading your book, I realized that I'm not doing a better job than any of them. I might want to think about myself that I'm doing a better job, but to admit it, I don't. I just have different ideas than them.
Yeah.
And I was actually at some point really grateful that they have my husband and my mom, who is a very different grandmother than she is or she was. She still is actually a mother to me and my siblings. So I'm grateful to have them, and I step back a lot to learn, like, they'll do their own mistakes, and I, God knows, do mine all the time. But they're trying to tell me, daughter, but mommy is learning. I'm in a learning process. But what she tells me these days is like, mommy, why did you tell me that you're learning? You're not learning a thing. We talked about this a long time ago. And what she's trying to tell me is that there is no progress. And I'm really trying to lie. From her point of view, I'm not trying hard enough because she can see all my faults. And I can't control it yet. I can't be what I'm hoping to be. So sometimes I tell her, no, mommy.
Yeah.
And it's true.
Yeah. And sometimes what I would say, I want to go and give you a hug, is that sometimes what I would talk about is, I got, right now, 51 years I'm trying to undo. and I know I'm not moving as quickly as you might need me to be. Because that's the truth. You know, we're trying to undo a lot. Yeah.
And that's what I was going to say. You know, it's never too late. I go back 3 or 4 years to stuff I know is still unresolved with Justin, and I'll bring it up again. I'll apologize, you know, so it's never too late. And I'll do it 2, 3 times too. Like a couple years will go by, and I'll just check in with you. You know, because sometimes it's not, you can't get it all out at one time. You know, so you constantly check in.
She reminds me of stuff that I have forgotten about. I don't know if that actually happened, but it's okay.
That's true, isn't it?
I apologize to myself for circumcising him. I'm like, I'm sorry.
I did too.
Absolutely not.
I know, he's 16 and he's like,
Well, I know some people need to leave. It's 8 o'clock. I'm happy to stay in the room and still talk if people want. I want to thank you for participating and engaging in the conversation. And I have a couple more sessions. One's about quitting, the value of quitting, which I've quit many times. And then I think, introversion, which I'm also an introvert. So, and we live in a mixed family of introverts and extroverts. So, yeah. But thank you all. And if anyone wants to stay.